The City Council business meeting. That's actually at 7:30. In just a minute, we'll be having our Community Development and Renewal Agency meeting, and then we'll start our regular City Council business meeting at 7:30. So appreciate your patience. It's a busy night. Renewal Agency meeting, and then we'll start our regular City Council business meeting at 7:30. So appreciate your patience. It's a busy night. Ready? Paula, you ready? All right. Thank you, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the City of Cottonwood Heights, our Community Development and Renewal Agency. This is our business meeting. We meet periodically on projects associated with our city. Tonight we have a fairly active agenda, and it begins with a public hearing where we, as a CDRA board, take public comment through this public hearing regarding the second amendment to the project area plan and the proposed amendment project area budget to the Canyon Center Community Development Area. So if there's anyone here who would like to speak to that, we'd like you to hold just a minute, and we're going to ask Jason Birmingham to kind of introduce the subject before we take those comments.
Thank you. Good evening. Members of the board of the Community Development Renewal Agency, appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've been asked to take just a couple of minutes to introduce the topic for the public hearing. It should be noted that this has been noticed, and there's been a 30-day period that's been provided to the public, along with the second amended project area plan and the amended budget, which has been available for inspection. My purpose tonight was to kind of just give a quick overview, and as soon as we get this up.
It was up a minute ago, then it went away.
Start, yeah, well. This is the culmination of quite a process. We've been through working with other participants, taxing entities who have helped to form this plan, budget, and ultimately the financing. As a reminder, that one isn't up, but this one is, so maybe turn your attention to this. And we'll work on that other. So I'm going to focus on this for the benefit of the public. This project area is the old Canyon Racket. Oh, there we go. Where the old Canyon Racket Club was. It's about 11 acres. This CDA was first created back in 2011. Multiple purposes consisting of economic development, job creation, and better utilization at the mouth of the canyon for parking structure, public parking purposes. And since the 2011, the original creation, there have been some necessary changes that have come up. Some of them are included here. The base year of 2010 is being proposed to be modified to the base year of 2016. The trigger date of 2015 is now being moved to tax year or no later than tax year 2021. And then there were some changes that have evolved over time relative to the site plan and the mix of commercial, retail, hotel, and other types of uses. And because of those changes and because of the overall desire to finance the parking structure and the public park amenities, an amendment to the original plan and budget have been pursued. We reviewed this in the previous meeting, but I'll just quickly, for the benefit of the public, go over How tax increment works: tax increment is property taxes that are used to facilitate, in a lot of cases, public infrastructure relative to projects. This, in 2011, originally was entered into where these entities participated at various percentages of their tax increment for a number of years. The 2018 proposed amendment constitutes some changes relative to the county and the school district and all of the taxing entities. Some of the percentages and time periods have not changed, but in each one of the cases, the base year value, as I mentioned previously, is changing from 2010 to 2016, and the trigger date, instead of having the trigger date 2015, has been extended in the current amendment to no later than tax year 2021. The next slide, again, is just a comparison of the development breakdown. You can see that the original plan did constitute or consider hotel, office, restaurant, retail, and even a second hotel with a parking structure. The revised site plan that has evolved over the past few years still includes a hotel, office, restaurant, retail, but the component of multifamily and single family has been added in to that site plan. And so that's one of the changes that have been modified. So tax increment is based on the total assessed value or incremental value of these projects once they're built. So this slide just projects that we anticipate about $55 million of new value that will be constructed and built on that site, on that 11 acres. That 55 million, then subtract out of that the $3.8 million base year value is what constitutes where the property tax increment will come off of. And so that's how the forecast was projected, and that's also been changed from what the original budget was. In the previous slide, I mentioned that some of the percentages and years have changed. Primarily, the county went from 100% at 18 years to 100% at 23 years. The Canyon School District also went from 100% for 20 years to 100% for 23 years. The rest of the taxing entities stayed at 25% for the 25-year period. Again, although the percentages and time frames are somewhat similar, the base year value and the trigger date are the main changes in the second amendment of the plan and the budget. Tax increment is always asked about, so the public might inquire of, is this a tax increase in that particular area? And it is not. It doesn't constitute a tax increase, but it's the taxes that would be levied on those properties that would, instead of flowing to the other taxing entities, would come to the Community Development Renewal Agency to be used for specific purposes. Purposes in this project would be a parking structure, park facilities, and to facilitate this development.
Jason, can I ask a question there I hadn't really considered? If any one of the participating entities did go through a truth in taxation, did raise their rate, does that just, that would increase revenues to the project or to the CD, to this board?
No, the way the interlocal agreements are written is those tax increases, the way they're defined, tax increases do not flow through to the Community Development or Renewal Agency. They're kept by the taxing entities that pass those.
That would be adjusted and the increment stays above that new increased value.
Correct.
Or assessment.
Right, yeah, yeah. So, and there, from time to time, the Canyon School District or, you know, the city or the county might go through a tax increase as part of a certified tax rate or a truth in taxation, but the interlocal agreement has to specify whether or not tax increases pass through, and all of the interlocal agreements do not allow for the tax increases to pass through. This is just a quick graph of how the tax increment works. This is a bar chart, but the bottom part of the bar chart is the blue, which is the base year. So there's base year taxes that are already created, even without any development really being added on top of it. The base year taxes continue to flow through the taxing entities as though the CDA wasn't created. So that's that blue portion of the bar. The light green portion is the 25% that would pass through to those taxing entities over that period. You can see in the last 2 years, it's a little different because some are participating just 20 years or 18 years. Some are participating 25 years. Some are only 23 years. And so you can see where the purple bar is what is passing through the CDRA. Now, at the end of the 25-year period, the major benefit is the red portion of this, which is that then it all flows through to the taxing entities on a higher level of participation than it would have previously. I'm going to just quickly go through those because those just represent the tables relative to those bar charts. But the base year taxes, it's about $50,000 a year, and that's not all the city's portion. The city's portion is a small portion of that, but it's about $50,000 a year in tax revenue that flows through to the taxing entities. Over 25 years, that's about $1.2 million. The 25%, which is in addition, which passes through because of this development being built on this site, is about $119,000 a year, or over the 25 years, about the $2.9 million. So in some ways, that's how the other taxing entities looked at this as a benefit and why they wanted to participate, because this was a much higher level of taxes that they anticipated they could get as compared to developing in a different context. The purple is the portion, again, that goes to the CDA, or the CDRA. And this is specifically outlined in the second amended plan and the budget. And so these dollars, the approximately $550,000 annually, or over the life of this, about $13.6 million, will be used on this next slide according to this schedule. Part of it goes to administering the project area. As I mentioned in our previous meeting, the school district passes through 100%, but then 30% goes back to them. So this is part of our budget, is that $2 million. Then there's a parking structure loan tax increment reimbursement, and then the park improvements that would improve on top of that acre, and then this county parking structure loan repayment. So that's the $7.75 million that would be coming from the county, which would be used to fund the parking structure. And it's just a portion. Part of that is funded, obviously, by the developer. Part of that would be funded through this participation. And then there is some remaining monies in the budget for operations and maintenance relative to the to the parking structure. And so that's the overview of the amended, or the second amended project area plan and budget, and certainly available when you take public comment. If there's questions that the public has, or if the board has any, I'm happy to address those.
Thank you, Jason. I know time is short, but I don't want to prohibit anyone from asking any questions. So let's go ahead and continue with the public hearing. Just for the audience, just a reminder that we're currently in the Community Development and Renewal Agency meeting of the City of Cottonwood Heights. This is not our city work session. That'll start in just a couple minutes. And right now, this is currently a public hearing regarding the Canyon Center development. So if anyone would like to comment on the Canyon Center development, now is the time, and please come forward. Okay, hearing none, we are going to close the public hearing regarding the Canyon Center development and move on the agenda for some action items. The first item is consideration of Resolution 2018-8, approving amendments to the public project area plan and the project area budget for the Canyon Center Community Development Area, or CDA. And I'd entertain a motion to approve that resolution.
I would move that we approve Resolution 20-18-08 and thank Jason and Shane and all the others who put so much time and effort in many years. I have no idea how many hours to this point.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's moved by Council Member Bracken, seconded by Council Member Shelton. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Council Member Shelton.
Are we council members in this context?
Board member.
Board members? Ah, okay. I'll call you board members then. Board Member Shelton.
Yes.
Board Member Bracken.
Yes.
Board Member Bruce.
Yes.
Board Member Michael.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. The next item is Resolution 2018-09, approving and ratifying amendments to the interlocal agreements with various taxing entities concerning this project. Any discussion at this time on that resolution?
Only noting that we proposed on the work session that each of the other entities have already approved it.
Yes, all of them have reapproved it just this current year, yes. Okay, hearing any discussion? Can I have a motion, please?
I move that we approve Resolution 2018-09.
It's been moved by Board Member Shelton. Do we have a second?
Second.
Been seconded by Board Member Bruce. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Board Member Michael.
Yes.
Board Member Bruce.
Yes.
Board Member Shelton.
Yes.
Board Member Bracken.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Make sure I have my right documents in front of me. Okay, we're number 10 is the other one. Okay, now on Resolution 2018-10, approving amendment number 1 to the interlocal agreement for Salt Lake County's provision of $7.75 million in funding for the Canyon Center. Any further discussion on that item?
There's been some potential discussion of this additional money being used for some really exciting things.
Well, what it does is it frees up $1.7 million in our current RDA fund, which now is frees it up for opportunities in the city. Yeah, thank you.
That's an amazing thing.
That's a plus. Okay, could I have a motion for 2018-10?
I move that we pass 2018-10.
It's been moved by Board Member Bruce. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Board Member Bracken. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Board Member Bracken.
Yes.
Board Member Shelton.
Yes.
Board Member Bruce.
Yes.
Board Member Michael.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Thank you. Okay, a lot of papers up here. Appreciate your patience. The next item is 3.4, consideration of Resolution 2018-11, approving the form of the development agreement and its related documents for the Canyon Center CDA. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, I'd call for the motion on this resolution.
Move that we approve Resolution 2018-11.
It's been moved by Board Member Bracken. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Board Member Michael. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Board Member Michael.
Yes.
Board Member Bruce.
Yes.
Board Member Shelton.
Yes.
Board Member Bracken.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Okay, I think that's all of the resolutions. The only thing we have left as far as the CDR agency meeting is approval of December 18, 2018 minutes.
I move that we approve the December 18 minutes.
Which, how do we do approve the minutes if that's tonight?
You're just adopting the process for approving them, which is the minutes, when they're prepared, will be circulated to the board, and then board members will have the ability to give.
So I'm not actually,
corrections.
so we're not actually taking a motion to approve then?
It's just approving the process.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the process. Have a motion to approve the process.
Yes, so moved.
So moved. Have a second. Move in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Okay, motion to adjourn the CDRA business meeting.
I move that we adjourn the CDR business meeting.
It's moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Move to a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned from the CDRA business meeting.
While the mayor's getting organized, there's little sheets on that back table if you wish to have comments. And there's all kinds of seating available over here on the east side. Come on in.
A nice view of the tree.
Beautiful Christmas tree.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you for everyone's patience. We're doing 4 meetings in one night, and I want to make sure that we're appropriate in our order. Welcome to the City of Cottonwood Heights. This is our City Council business meeting this night of Tuesday, December 18th. We're starting a little bit later than normal because of some other previous meetings, but appreciate your patience and attendance. I appreciate Councilmember Bruce sharing with you that if anyone would like to speak during citizen comments or public comments regarding the Walsh property, if you'll fill out these cards and pass them up to the middle, we'll be able to keep some order and decorum. And again, we have 2 public comment periods tonight. One is citizen comments. We'll separate those from the Walsh property public comments. But again, welcome. We'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have a young scout here, Bryant Hill. Bryant, you want to come up and lead us in a pledge, please?
Please stand for the pledge. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bryant, thank you for doing that for us. The next item on our agenda is citizen comments. So what I would encourage you, if you would, direct these comments that are more in general. This is not the public comments regarding the Walsh property. That'll follow after these comments. So I'll call names up. Can you tell? So you may want to correct me when I call your name. David Richardson. Oh, I know Dave. Hi, Dave.
Hi, nice to see all of you. I'd like to make a couple of comments about the clean air resolution.
You bet.
I just found out about it a couple of days ago, so I wasn't involved in putting it together. But I have been working many years on air quality issues and on energy efficiency. And this looks like it's something that would be worth Cottonwood Heights getting involved in. It would be a good start, and if it leads to some sort of a committee that would start looking at these issues, and particularly looking at the issue of sustainability. And I think it would evolve from just the clean air to other issues that also are involved for sustainability. So I do support this.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. Lynn Krause.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I was a little disappointed to see that the Fort Union land use map amendment change was not on the agenda tonight, so I'm just kind of bringing it up as a reminder to everyone. It's project GPA-18-002, and the Planning Commission voted on November 7th of 2018 to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the project. One thing I'd like to mention is that when the Planning Commissioners questioned staff on this specific project, staff implied it was a temporary change. I would hope the City Council views this as a more permanent change. And again, I think I've said this in the past, but our intent, or my intent of continuing to bring this up, is that we feel like we're losing some of the character of our city, and this would be a small step towards retaining that character. So I really do hope that it's not a temporary change. I'd also like to ask that you review the comments made by the individual property owners affected by the change. They were overwhelmingly in support of it. There were only 2 people that had negative comments about it, and those were people that wanted a business in that area. As a matter of fact, several of the residents who are property owners wanted their property designated as low-density residential as opposed to the residential office that was the designation in that plan. So I would just, again, recommend that you read their comments. And given past precedent in our city, I would hope that you would honor their wishes as individual property owners. That's all I had to say on that. And another quick comment, I noticed that the weekly update is no longer being updated, and I heard a rumor that maybe we're not going to have that anymore. It's the weekly update that's on the web page where the minutes and the agenda items are, and I haven't seen one for about 3 or 4 weeks, and I just thought I'd throw it. I read that thing every week, and I think it's very informational. It gives a great summary of what's happened in the city that week, so I like it in case there's a question about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Nancy Hardy.
Hello, Mayor, council members. I just had some thoughts. I typed up a letter, so I'll pass it out after, so you don't have to make notes. Record, I just, I think y'all are going to be updating the website, so I just wrote down some thoughts, and I kind of titled this Reach Out to Residents, and just some things I was thinking about. Maybe the new website could have a simple link to show the residents the current city projects, the status, the updates on the progress, etc. And some of the things that we've talked about before, the Q&A times, the between the residents and maybe a quarterly Q&A. Senior Center, it was previously talked about creating one here at City Hall. City Center, Fort Union, corridor study, just, you can read through the letters, but just items, Wasatch Boulevard, gravel pit, the roundabout, it could maybe inform residents and show illustrations of what it might look like. Bike lanes could include illustrations and explanations of the various bike lane markings for motorists, bicyclists, and pedestrians. And also, then after all that, I have a Beautify Cottonwood Heights wish list. And one thing I've mentioned off and on over the years are maybe change out the old Jersey barriers that are throughout the city. And just, I know when I first moved here, I saw that was something I noticed. I thought it was a work in progress, that something was going to be going in there, but they're still there. So if that's, to protect cars, maybe there's different ways to make it look better if it's a permanent thing. Add entering Cottonwood Heights signs where you enter Cottonwood Heights. Simplify signage and the lane divider poles at the high T. Add a large map to council chamber room. And then I just had some thoughts on the interactive TVs to make them interactive in the lobby. But some of those things could be on the website too. Maybe like highlight walking trails, highlight bike lanes, highlight bus stops, park and rides, highlight points of interest, like restaurants, bakeries, shops, or anything that anybody had some interest in. And maybe mimic the TVs in council chambers out there in the lobby, or mimic those. So if people are out there, they could see, the same things that are on these TVs. And anyway, just some little thoughts.
Great suggestion. Thank you. Please leave a copy with us. Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. Larry Seaborg.
Mr. Mayor and council members, I'm here to discuss traffic safety at the Creek Road entrance to Watson Hollow 2 project.
Would you use the microphone, please? Thank you.
I've sent all of you a letter which you've seen earlier. I'll just mention one or two things now in the 3 minutes I have. The thing that really prompted me to come here is I talked to your city engineer earlier this year and then again a few weeks ago, and he indicated that there was a 45-foot width needed to accommodate the lanes, 3 lanes of traffic, 2 bike paths, and some curb space. And when the gutter was poured, or when the edge of the cement was poured by Ivory Homes, I noticed that it didn't appear that there was enough room to accommodate all these lanes. And so I went down and measured and found that they're about 7 or 8 feet short of what your city engineer says you need to accommodate those traffic lanes. So there's a major discrepancy there that needs to be resolved. As it stands now, there's no room for a left turn lane going up that hill to turn into Watson Hollow 2. So I mentioned this to Mr. Gilson, and I told him what I'd measured, and he said he'd check into it. I haven't heard back from him since early December. Another thing I'm concerned about at that intersection is he indicated to me that there's not going to be any acceleration or deceleration lanes for people entering that project and leaving that project. And I'm concerned about that, because if you're going down that hill and you want to make a right turn into Watson Hollow 2, and you've got traffic coming right behind you, you got to get out of the way. You need some place to get out of the way. Even on level areas in the area in the city, you may often have a right turn lane, and you don't have that on that hill. You also have you need an acceleration lane when you're exiting Watson Hollow to go down the hill, and you have that now, and so I suggest those are important. Your city engineer said what I see there is just a part of the downhill lane, and that's not possible, because on the downhill side, the lane that's going down the hill comes to an abrupt end about 50 to 100 feet below. So I didn't discuss it further with them, but it's not possible to have a lane running along that side. This is now paved. Just one other thing I mentioned, I asked about sidewalks, and I was told that sidewalks would be planned in front of Ivory Homes is required to build sidewalks along their section of property. So there you are. I just in closing, Mayor Peterson has offered to let me meet with the council members. And
well, I said, well, we would take your information and we'd contact that and find out who it's best to meet with, and maybe the city manager, whomever. But yeah, I appreciate your phone call and our conversation, and and I read your letter today, and I think you make some points. So we'll turn it to our city manager, and we'll get back with you, and either I'll meet with you or we'll have the engineer, whomever, to go through all your list. Yes.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. Eric Cran.
Merry Christmas to everybody. I'm sad to hear the issues that Creek Road is having, and I'm also sad to hear that Complete Streets / Vision Zero initiatives are not considered after the retreat. Because a complete street will take into account egress and ingress, sidewalks, bike lanes, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I also support the efforts to enact the Cottonwood Heights 100% Clean Energy Initiative. On the police safety message that was shared via email, it's a missed opportunity to remind everybody to please not idle your vehicle. That goes in conjunction with clean energy and clean air. I also would like to talk a little bit about the organizational chart of the city. I was reading it and looking at it after last time we had the meeting, and it shows Cottonwood Heights citizens, city council, city manager, deputy manager, and the department heads, and then everybody else, staff. With that in mind, today you will be receiving public comment regarding the Walsh property. I'm going to echo a little bit of what Ms. Krause said. I would like to point out that since the project was first brought to your attention in the fall of 2017, a similar petition to change the land use map on the east side of Fort Union was made by those that sit at the top of the organizational chart. What took about 1 month to do for a developer in September of 2017 will be left undone throughout the calendar year of 2018. I think that that's inappropriate and insulting to the people on at the top of that organizational chart. During the last meeting, the council also received much public comment regarding a contract extension. I, along many others, were surprised that there was no formal review process in the record for the position of chief of police. I was even more surprised to listen many of you state that you review his performance in a weekly or daily basis. Perhaps I am confused, because from what I read in the city's ordinances, performance reviews of department heads is not an assignment left to the city council. The council can mandate the city manager to conduct such performance evaluations, and it was unclear whether any directive had ever been given to the former city manager, or if that directive is now given to the new city manager. It's also my understanding that the city council can and perhaps should conduct regular and formal performance evaluation of the city manager himself. That's within the purview of that. And with that, that's all I have. Maybe I got some of those issues wrong, but I got some of those codes listed over here, and that was my understanding. So if somebody can clarify that, that'll be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. William Cosgrove.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Bill Cosgrove. I'm a pediatrician. I'd like to speak to the 100% Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee. I've been part of the Cottonwood community for the last 37 years, and we have about 10,000 children in Cottonwood Heights, and I'd like to talk to their needs. You already know that the accumulating exposure to particles and chemicals in air pollution is linked to lung disease and heart disease and cancers. Even at low levels of exposure, lower than what usually occurs here in our valley, the burning of hydrocarbons spreads multiple poisons into the air that we must all breathe. This shortens our lives. We are all secondhand smokers, and light cigarette smoke. There's no known safe level. Damage occurs at every known exposure level. Research studies even show effects on our chromosomes. Even low levels of pollution shorten the telomeres of our chromosomes. I can explain that if you'd like. And this shortening of telomeres is related to shortening of our lifespans, leading to premature deaths. Recent studies have shown that this shortening of telomeres is found on the day you're born. If mom was exposed to air pollution during the pregnancy, her baby has already had his life shortened by air pollution in our valley, even before he takes his own first breath. Now, as a pediatrician, many times I've had the wonderful, really awesome privilege of saving saving a child's life, of extending a life. Now you, city managers and city council members, now have the awesome privilege of extending lives of thousands of our children. You get the opportunity to commit to clean energy, to lessen the poisons in our air. You get to save lives. You get to be the heroes. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Since we've had several comments on sustainability, I think it's appropriate that we mention that in our work session before this meeting and several meetings prior to this, that we've discussed this topic, and I think on January 8th right now we're tentatively set to have a sustainability resolution prepared by that time. We're just doing the final language adjustments and having those reviews. So we're moving in that direction. Thank you. Anna McNamara.
McNamara, but thank you anyway.
God, I should know that. I've said it enough times. My apology.
I'm here to speak on behalf of your consideration of Resolution 2018-77, participating in the Municipal Alternate Voting Methods Pilot Project, otherwise known as ranked choice voting. I love that our city is moving forward with this style of ranked choice voting. I think it presents a more fair, accurate representation for voters, and I'm just really excited to see Cottonwood Heights moving in this direction. In that exciting note and looking at all these cool changes to come, I also think it would be very relevant and appropriate to also consider addressing term limits so that we can continue to make sure we're representing different types of people, different styles of people, and as new people come into office, allowing that circulation to occur. As we look to that future and the future of the way we want to shape our city council and our city, I also want to speak on behalf of our commitment to clean energy. It's my understanding that the city council is considering setting 2032 as our goal for Ready for 100, which the Sierra Club is asking cities to commit to being 100% sustainable by a goal that they set, whether that's in 100 years or 5 years. I think that just like the doctor up here just mentioned, we're making a big commitment to our quality of life that residents are receiving, and it's very, very important that we support our own city's sustainability. Many of you here in the City Council and residents behind me saw just last week the University of Utah published a study showing that women miscarry 60% more often while inversion is happening. And so as someone who has miscarried during that type of thing myself, I think it's very, very important that as we're looking towards the future of our city and the future of the Wasatch Front, that Cottonwood Heights is on that leadership side of history, making our city a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. David Walsh. Yeah. Dave, you want to talk on the Walsh property issue? That's following.
Yes.
All right, let's wait then. Rochelle Kaplan.
Probably have to lower the mic. Good evening, everybody, and happy holidays. Whoops. I'm here to speak on two matters. I support everyone here who already spoke in support of the Cottonwood Heights 100% renewable energy resolution. Cottonwood Heights, which I love living in. I've lived here for 20 years. I moved here from New York City, and I love it here. And Cottonwood Heights has such, and Utah has such abundant sun. It's one reason that my husband came here, that and skiing. And also, we have so much wind. And to not take advantage of those resources that don't do harm are so wonderful. I'm disappointed, actually, that when this building was built, that it wasn't built with solar energy included in the model and in the features. I think that was a lost opportunity. I know it would be a lot more expensive now to put in solar here, and it would really be a model for the community and for other communities. Anyway, so I do support you voting yes on the resolution once the wording is completed, that you establish a sustainability committee to help make sure that the goals that you set out and that the community supports will be met. It's so important on the grounds that have already been mentioned in terms of health, but also just moral reasons for the earth. As a skier and just someone who walks the dog several times a day, I don't like breathing in particulate matter and having to go up to the ski areas to escape some of that. The other measure that I also support, which is later on your agenda, is also ranked choice voting. I'm on the board of Votarize. I also, which aims to increase voter participation in Utah, which once had such great voter participation rates and has really seen a dramatic decline. Although this midterm election was a little bit better, still not very good. And so I commend that you look at a couple of websites. Represent Us, the founder was just out here a couple of weeks ago talking about the benefits of ranked choice voting as democracy promoting. Also fair vote. There's many reasons it increases civility and decreases negative campaigning and ads, so people feel better. There's more choice among the candidates, and more of a chance for the collective will to be achieved in that even if your first choice candidate doesn't get in, maybe you think about your second choice candidate. It has tremendous benefits, and these are outlined in those two websites, holy mackerel, that I mentioned earlier. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rochelle. Ace, is it Siegel? Slagle. Oh, that's an I. I'm sorry.
Hi, I know I'm kind of a young face. I go to school just at Brighton. I'm the communications director of the Young Democrats Club. I also work with March for Our Lives Utah and a bunch of other organizations. I'm here just to talk about my support for the Clean Initiative resolution as well. I just think it's really important to have a youth perspective on this because we're the ones who are growing up here and we're spending so much of our time in this area. And it's really important to grow up in an area where it's safe. And I would just like to remind everyone that this amendment, it's nonpartisan. It really is just for the health of our citizens. It has nothing to do with what political party you identify with. It has so much to do with the health of the people around you. And I'm only vaguely familiar with the environmental laws that are in place in Utah right now. I do believe that in, I think it's I believe it's chapter 9.62 of, there's a non-idling law, and I just came to ask for the reinforcement of that law. I just believe that, so I believe that the law says that you are not to be idling on public or private property when your car is in place. And I just think that it's so important that we begin to enforce other laws like that, because there are laws in place that are so important that we just tend to fling to the wayside. And I think that especially with this resolution, it's really important that we remember what we want out of it. And we remember that we need to make sure that whatever we're putting in place is something that can be achieved. And we need to keep our focus on making sure that the goals that we have for the citizens to ensure their safety, we need to make sure that we're going to follow through with acts such as this clean air resolution. And because of like the idling laws, even as something that is as small as refraining from idling, it can make a huge difference for everyone in this community. And it really is so important for the health of these people that we make sure that this goes through and is enforced. That's all I have for you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ace, and hopefully we have more students follow your example and come speak to us and share their thoughts. Thanks again. Will McCarville, Will?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for letting me speak tonight. I almost didn't come as my lungs have been pretty badly compromised by the bad air we have in the valley, and I suffer through it every winter. And so clean air, clean energy, they're really personal for me. Just like a former speaker who was talking about miscarriages being higher during a inversion episode. So as you think about a 100% clean energy policy, I'd like to ask you to think about this. Sooner rather than later. I challenge you to be bold. I challenge you to move the date up closer. Again, I have a personal vested interest in this, plus I have a daughter and a grandson who have asthma and live in this valley as well. But I would like to challenge you to step it up, to move the date up. I think it's the right thing to do. And I think it's a great place for Cottonwood Heights to be a leader in this issue and step up and say, all right, 2032, that may be good enough for Park City, but for us down here where the air is bad, we need to move it to an earlier date. So as you think early, think sooner. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Will. Jim Lamarais. I probably said that wrong too. Yeah. I knew it.
It's Jim Lamar.
Lamar. Oh. Well, it looked like a U. Sorry.
Hi. I'm also here to comment on the upcoming vote to adopt a resolution to commit to a environmental sustainable energy policy. And I'm simply want to just say, encourage all of you to vote yes. But then also, there's actions that will need to be taken. And so I would encourage to establish a volunteer sustainability committee and hire a sustainability manager, and that can be done in collaboration with neighboring cities, is my understanding, to help keep the costs down. But then we can then all work as one. And to me, it makes sense to take action at this at a community level. The climate is changing, and not from the better. You see it in the news all the time. Carbon pollution is a major cause. I don't think there's any doubt about that. This is simply one of a million things that has to be done throughout the country, throughout the state. And these types of commitments are being made across the country by cities and corporations. and we need to do it for our children. And I would like to know that I am part of a community that is demonstrating leadership and making a commitment, as many other progressive communities are doing. So again, vote yes.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you.
And hopefully you all come back on January 8th, and we'll have, hopefully, if things go as planned, we'll have a resolution to consider on that subject. Jerry Harwell.
Mayor, I'm here for the Walsh property.
Oh, I called you Jerry. Jerry?
That's never happened before.
Samara Shah.
Hello, my name is Samara Shah. I'm in 5th grade at Butler Elementary School. I am here because keeping Earth healthy for people and animals is important to me. I hear about climate change in the news. I worry about what this means for my future. I feel angry that we could be doing things to make the world cleaner and healthier, but it doesn't seem like that is happening. My good friend Miles, who helped me make this poster, has asthma. He feels sad that he can't play outside at recess, after school, and on weekends. I want him and my other friends with asthma to be able to play outside with me all the time. My friends and I want the city to make a commitment to clean energy to show that we can make the world a better place if we work together right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for all of us, who graduated from Butler Elementary, we appreciate our students coming. Is it Larry Wick? Did I say that wrong? Larry? Okay, we'll hold on for that a moment. Thank you. Samantha Stott? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Samantha Stott. I just moved to Cottonwood Heights about 6 months ago, and I grew up in Utah about 2 years ago now. I was in Standing Rock in North Dakota, and I was there for a lot of reasons. I was there for the people, for the Native American people whose land our ancestors have already taken, and I was there to defend the land and those people, and I experienced violence myself, and I watched people of that land experience violence for trying to protect their water, and they don't just protect it for themselves, but they do it for their ancestors, and they do it for their children. And I'm standing here today for my children. I don't have any yet, but someday when I do, I want to be able to look them in the eye and tell them that I did everything I could to try and keep this planet whole and safe. So I'm here to urge all of you to act quickly and not to compromise, but to do everything that you can to make this a better earth for our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. I appreciate those comments. And for some of us, our grandchildren. Yeah. All right, Sean Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and the City Council. Yeah, I just wanted to echo what a lot of people have said tonight, and I wanted you to vote yes on the resolution for adopting environmental sustainability policy. I'm glad to hear you guys are making some progress on that, and sounds like it might come to fruition. I'd also like for you to establish a sustainability committee to aid in the implementation. I think we need a lot of smart people who are energized for this actually to occur, and so I think a committee would be very good for that. Also, I think we need to have a sustainability manager to kind of keep you on track and not just let the goal kind of just, just be basically like ornamental. So, I mean, I encourage you guys to do all three of those things. I mean, we've heard a lot on morality, health. I mean, economics, I don't know why you guys wouldn't do this. I mean, this is something that's going to make this city very attractive and stand out to the people that are planning on moving here. We get a lot of transplants. I'm from New York. I came here for the skiing. If skiing didn't exist, I probably would have never ended up here. The tech community is growing. They're very forward and green thinking. So obviously it will make the community here very attractive to them. I know you guys got some competition in the other cities and stuff. So yeah, I think this will help you guys really stand out. Not to mention, there's a multitude of businesses that are really affected by the local outdoor industry that we have here. I mean, how many industries like rent ski gear or snowboard gear? Also, the restaurants that people stop at after they're done skiing or snowboarding. Or, I mean, who wants to go up in the mountains if they're the trees aren't growing as well as they are? So, I mean, on the economic standpoint, I mean, this is going to amplify you and make this city, put this city on the map. I mean, I grew up in New York. I didn't know about Cottonwood Heights, but we do these things. We continue to stand out. People across the country are going to know this. And your recruiting budget's going to go down just because the word of mouth is going to be so good for this area. So, yeah, I think you should do all those things. And I'm glad to hear you guys are making progress. And I hope to see you guys vote yes in January. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, that's the last card I have on speaking just on citizen comments. Is there anyone who would like to speak in general, excluding the Walsh property public comment period? If so, let me know and you can come on up. Okay. Thank you for those citizen comments. We appreciate it. And we'd like to move now on to our public comment period of our agenda. Go ahead.
If I make just a couple of comments on some of those.
You sure may, and others may as well. Go ahead, Scott.
Just on the sustainability things, one of the things that we discussed in our work session on our sustainability clause was to document in that resolution some of the things that we have and we have always done as a city here, because I felt that was important. Some of the things that we've taken, and so that to me at least makes that resolution a lot more exciting. I do hope that we get it and we pass it on. There was one comment about solar on city halls being a missed opportunity. We did look at that. Unfortunately, at the time, there was a 47-year payback on it. Even in the last couple of years, I think that has drastically reduced, and I think there's probably the support on the council to look at that again in the very near future and get it done. But we did look at that. We haven't ignored it. It just at the time it was just not quite cost effective. So while you were at least all here, I figured I'd at least get those 2 points.
I would like to say thank you. I'm so moved and touched by your comments. I feel the collective hope. I feel the collective concern, and I'm very moved. I feel the urgency. And I'm so appreciative for the comments that were shared tonight. Thank you all for coming out.
Any other comments from the council? Okay, we hope to see you all again soon, those that are leaving. Now we'll move on to the agenda on public comments regarding the PDD 18-001. This is the Walsh property. It's a rezone and development. Mike, do you want to take just a moment and introduce the subject?
Thanks, Mayor and Council. It will be a few moments. I've got a slideshow to get through. We'll try to move quickly. I know a lot of the public in attendance and the Mayor and Council and even some of the other department staff have heard a lot about this project, are at least vaguely familiar with it, so I'll provide an overview. The other one, Dan. Following my presentation, we have agendaed the applicant to provide the council with a brief presentation as well. Okay, we'll follow that with public comment. Okay. So this is a request utilizing the Plan Development District Ordinance, the PDD ordinance, And there are a few ordinances in play here. So before I start, I feel I should clarify what the differing ordinances are. The Plan Development District Ordinance is Chapter 19.51 of the existing city code. That does not grant any building entitlement or building right on any property in the city. That grants the ability to apply for a Plan Development District zone following the procedures listed in that zoning ordinance chapter. So the PDD ordinance, Chapter 19.51, is the mechanism that can be utilized in certain areas of the city following certain requirements and meeting certain standards that allow an applicant to propose a rezone following that ordinance chapter. So when I reference Chapter 19.51, that is the existing zoning ordinance. That's the framework used to propose what will be known herein as the PDD 1, which is a specific ordinance specific to this property. If you have questions, stop me and ask if that needs to be clarified further. So I'll just jump into the presentation here. Maybe. Can you just flip the slide for me? It's on. I've got nothing. All right, the subject property is referenced and affectionately known as the Walsh property. This is in the very northwestern corner of Cottonwood Heights, just east of the I-215 interchange. It's a 5.93 acre piece of land that currently is developed with one single family residential house. It is surrounded by existing development on all sides as well. Next slide. I'm going to start with the proposed site plan, and I'll fill in the details as we move on. But the proposed development here consists mainly of 3 multifamily residential buildings with some live-work mixed-use units mixed into that. Okay, we're good now, Dan. Thank you. This is a site plan, and we'll come back to this in more detail. To start, I'll begin with the required process that any applicant of a Plan Development District zone must follow. It begins well before any public hearing is scheduled with a pre-application conference, and actually steps 1 and 2 are generally done with city staff, and a concept plan can be presented to the city council at that time. This applicant, I believe, was in with probably the previous mayor and council with a concept plan prior to this year. Community workshops are then required. This is community meetings held outside of the city forum. They're not official city meetings, but they are required to be held, and minutes of those meetings are required to be taken and submitted as part of the application. The applicant held, I believe, 3 or 4 community meetings. The requirement is to hold 2 with neighboring properties and residents in the area. 4 is a draft application submittal. This is a draft submittal that's reviewed by staff for completeness and accuracy, and that becomes the official PDD zone change application. And at this point, the public hearing process begins and is scheduled. So number 6 is where this project spent most of its time. This began with the Planning Commission. It took its first public hearing in mid-June of 2018. And over the course of 7 Planning Commission meetings, a mixture of hearings and meetings for discussion only, and 1 site visit, the Planning Commission took a lot of public comment, debated the project, the merits of the project, discussed additions and subtractions and modifications from the project, and really thoroughly reviewed this application in that time. So from June until November, that's where this project was. Number 7 did need to come into play for this project. For any portion of a development in a PDD area that has architectural appurtenances exceeding a certain height, in this case 50 feet, the city's Architecture Review Commission is required to review and sign off on that change. That did happen at the Architecture Review Commission's last meeting, I believe 2 weeks ago. And then 8, City Council review and decision. This is a legislative decision, so this decision represents a zone change to the property. It's a zone change with more detail than a typical zone change would present to you, but it is a legislative decision nonetheless. So the Planning Commission's role in this case was to recommend either approval or denial, and it comes to the mayor and council for final consideration.
Mike, just really quick, did the ARC, the Architecture Review Commission, review the other stuff at any point?
They do not.
That would project be a conditional use process?
Well, that would be if the property were located in a gateway overlay area, and this property is not.
So, Mike, you mentioned council review and decision. Is it true that we're scheduled to vote on that decision in January? Is that correct?
That will be the tentative schedule. Okay. And that's true for Planning Commission as well. Once you hold the requisite public hearing, it becomes an action item, and that happened with the Planning Commission, and the Commission continued the item numerous times to discuss issues. So that's a procedural scheduling matter. So again, here's the context of the property. The current zoning of the property in the surrounding area. The subject property is currently zoned R18. There is a single-family residential neighborhood directly south of this property, which accesses on Fort Union Boulevard. That is also zoned R18. The remaining adjacent properties are zoned RM, which is residential multifamily. That's our high-density residential zoning district. And then outside that, we have some office, research, and development zone property, as well as an R2 zone property, a two-family residential zoning designation that is developed with the church right now. And again, you can see the built environment constraints around it with the freeway and the interchange there.
Sorry to interrupt. Where's the R2?
R2 is the lighter orange color.
The one that's the only one, not the yellow, but the. Can you point to it with your pointer?
Kind of the
northeast corner gets lost.
Northeast corner.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
R2, but it's a church, right?
It's a church, yeah. Okay, and the current land use designation, this is what the general plan's land use chapter dictates as the long-range vision for land use in this particular area of the city. And I will note that we've reviewed previous iterations of the land use map and the general plan. This land use designation shown here has not been modified for the subject property or those adjacent to it since incorporation in 2005. So the city's original general plan and current general plan has reflected this land use designation since incorporation. Again, we see the high-density residential around the property, but the property itself is also designated with a land use designation of high-density residential. Some mixed use there on 1300 East and Fort Union, and then the low density where that existing single-family neighborhood is. This is not the current zoning on the property, but if a proposal were to come in for a zone change from R18 as it is today to a high-density residential, which would correspond with the residential multifamily zone, the general plan does support that request as it is adopted today. And then finally, the Plan Development District tier map. A property and an applicant cannot apply for a rezone under the Plan Development District unless it falls within one of these designated tiers. The 3 tiers correspond to the maximum or minimum development requirements and intensities in each area. We've got Tier 1, which is the gravel pit, which allows the highest intensity potential development. Tier 2, which is the nodes around major intersections in the city, so 1300 East, Highland, and 2300 East. And that's a mid-level intensity. And then Tier 3 is the corridors connecting those major nodes on Fort Union Boulevard. I'll quickly run through the adjacent developed context of this property. To the north of the subject property is Pinnacle at Fort Union Apartments. It's a for-rent apartment development. Those are 3-story buildings with a pitched roof. To the east are Stonehaven condominiums. The majority of those buildings are 4 stories with a pitched roof, with one being 3 and a clubhouse. Those are owner-occupied condominiums, but still multifamily, high-density development. Directly to the south is the single-family residential neighborhood. and that is a cul-de-sac, again, accessed off of Fort Union Boulevard. And then west of that single-family neighborhood, and again, south of the subject property, are the Orchards at Countrywoods condominiums, owner-occupied condominiums located in the multifamily residential, high-density residential zone. So back to this proposed development. The proposal consists of two different items. One is the proposed ordinance text. That's the ordinance language that will apply and become the law on this property. Two is the development plan, and this is where the PDD is different than other zone changes. The development plan is actually a site plan that reflects the ordinance proposal. So consideration of this item is consideration of a zone change, but one where you see exactly what's being proposed and what level of development is being proposed. Any changes to what's proposed after a decision is made would need to run back through the entire process. So this is very definitive. The development plan being part of the zone, the site plan and the construction plans themselves and what's been submitted become part of the ordinance chapter if adopted. So this is the ordinance text as proposed by the applicant, and this was their original proposal. This is not the current recommended state of the ordinance. And I'll breeze through this fairly quickly. The allowed uses here would consist primarily of multifamily residential units with live-work units as well to satisfy a non-residential or retail commercial requirement that I'll explain later. The development standards proposed, maximum height of 4 stories or 50 feet, and that would exclude the architectural appurtenances, which I again will show you when we get to the elevations. Setbacks are shown on the development plan. Maximum lot coverage 30%, architectural standards as depicted. And other standards in here, standards for lighting, signage standards, landscaping is going to be as shown as on the landscape plan as proposed, fencing. The Plan Development District Ordinance requires a sustainable design element, an environmentally friendly design. What's being proposed is compliance with the goals and the general principles of the U.S. Green Building Council, and that would be submitted in a written narrative subject to review by staff before any building permit is issued. And I'll circle back. The PDD ordinance requires below market rate housing. And I've got the exact text that we'll analyze later, but the original proposal by the applicant was a proposal for 10% of all the units, not just the residential, but also the mixed-use units, to be senior housing units, which would be designed and built to be ANSI compliant, which is an ADA accessibility standard, and then leased at a 10% price reduction to qualifying seniors. For comparison, this is the zone proposal as it stands today, and this is the staff recommendation for the zoning ordinance text. And the underlined items on this screen are the changes that have been made. We have recommended further definition of what is allowed in the mixed-use, the live-work mixed-use units to administrative professional office, studios, and residential use with home office component as well. The development standards have not changed. We have proposed that the senior housing proposal be stricken altogether and replaced with a straightforward, enforceable, very clear below market rate standard, which would be a standard that's enforceable and is affordable to households earning not more than 50% of the area median income. And I'll provide the rationale for this recommendation later.
Is area defined as city, county?
Yeah, AMI is a standard. It's kind of a standard definition.
What's the area?
Generally, this would be the Cottonwood Heights area.
The city.
Right. Lighting standards have been changed to comply more closely with the city's existing lighting standards for the height of light fixtures and the cutoffs that we seek, especially when adjacent to residential development. We have added, and this is based on proposed changes by the applicant and comments made by the public and recommended by the Planning Commission, a tree preservation provision. There are some tall, mature trees on this property, and we'd like to do what we can to preserve those and ensure they're preserved. So what we've proposed is a tree protection plan be prepared by a certified arborist and submitted and reviewed by staff prior to any disturbance of the land to identify which trees can be preserved, and if trees cannot, a rationale for why they can't. and then a slightly stricter requirement for if trees are removed, what the replacement has to consist of at a minimum. And fencing, this was also a discussion of the Planning Commission. Fencing adjacent to the single-family residential, the requirement has been strengthened a little bit to require an 8-foot steel reinforced vinyl fence adjacent to single-family residential and a 6-foot vinyl fence on the remaining boundaries of the property. So the development plan is essentially this site plan put into words. So I won't read this word for word, but this consists of 3 buildings. Buildings A and B are on the north side of the property. They're U-shaped buildings settled on the north side of the property. They're the larger buildings. And then building C is across the creek on the southwest portion of the property there. The proposal is to develop 3 of these buildings. Buildings A and B are roughly 25 to 27,000 square feet. Building C is about 19,000 square feet. These are all proposed to be 4-story buildings with first floor structured parking and live-work mixed-use units with 3 levels of residential plus mixed-use units on the second level on the remaining stories. So a parking pedestal with 3 units or 3 levels of living space above that. The building height proposed is at its maximum 54 feet, but the structure height itself, the roof height is about 42 feet, and there's some parapets and decorative appurtenances that get to 50, and then a handful of decorative features that exceed 50 up to 54. The setbacks proposed, this will be easier to demonstrate on the development plan, but the front setback, which is to the east, is about 60 feet from the east property line. The north setback is 12 to 20 feet. That's adjacent to the Pinnacle Fort Union development. The south setback for building A and B, and this is the one that was discussed at the most length in the Planning Commission process. This is the setback adjacent to the single-family residential area. The closest wings of the building are proposed at approximately 75 feet from the property line. The bulk of the building is 125 to 130 feet from that property line as well. And then building C is approximately 25 feet to the north of the Orchards at Country Woods condominiums, and then 60 feet west of that property line as well. A few other items to hit on here. The proposed parking is 369 stalls, a mixture of structured and surface parking. This calculates out to a 1.8 parking ratio, which does exceed the city's minimum standard, which I'll show you in just a minute. The density here is 33.6 units to acre if you do not count those mixed-use live-work units, 34.4 units per acre if you do, and the maximum allowable density in Tier 2 areas is 35 units per acre.
Sorry, I apologize if I missed it. Can you explain the open space 43%, and can you go back to the map and show me?
Yes. Open space is non-building, non-parking.
Can you go back to the map?
And I'll go to this map here. So non-building, non-parking, it's just all the landscape buffer, pedestrian areas, the pool and community areas are included in that as well. And the creek also.
43%, so almost half. If I were to take all that green and match it up, it should be half of the total. Or 40, I mean, I'm not seeing it, sorry.
Yeah, that is correct. No surface parking, no building, but it does include the pedestrian, the pool area, the community areas there, any of the landscape islands, the buffers, the creek area.
Oh, that whole creek corridor.
Were there walking paths or something there, or is it just talk to me about the amenities and the connectivity.
There are numerous proposed amenities. It is in the
I'm not talking about
slide.
the pool
Right.
and things.
So there is pedestrian walking paths between the buildings, I believe around the borders of the buildings. There are picnic areas that aren't as clearly shown on this around the creek. There are things like dog washes and other community, rental amenities on the site for the tenants there. There's a pavilion there to the north of Building C on the west side, but there is a level of pedestrian connectivity throughout the project. So we'll come back to that, but I will just proceed here. So in addition to the site plan that's being shown, the development plan includes traffic impact report and traffic circulation plan within the site, pedestrian circulation plan, which is not proposed here, but I can certainly provide, a parking plan, open space plan, amenities plan, transit access plan, and that is, as proposed, mainly identifying access to transit stops nearby and identifying which stops they are and you know, the distance it would take to walk to those. A lighting plan and a building massing plan. Those will all become part of the PDD1 ordinance if adopted. For comparison, did we have a question?
On the transit access, is there pedestrian access through the condos on the corner?
No. No,
So
it's
they would
all
have
from
to all go out to
6720.
13th
Mm-hmm.
and then down to Fort Union, access the Fort Union
Mm-hmm.
transit, or 13th East.
Correct. There are some UTA stops on 13th, yeah.
That's actually the most reasonable.
Mm-hmm. For comparison, and this is not to say it's an inevitability, but if an application were to come in other than the Plan Development District Ordinance to rezone the property to residential multifamily, being that the general plan supports high-density residential on this property, this comparison is under the assumption that that rezone would be granted, which would be followed by a conditional use application to develop multifamily residential. These are some of the standards we'd see under conventional zoning today. Your density and your height would be less. Your density would be 22 units to the acre, approximately, instead of 35. Your building height would be 35 feet, or 2 stories, rather than the 4 proposed. Your setbacks are far less as well. Your front setback's 30 feet. Your side setback, your minimum setback from adjacent property lines would only be 15 feet in this case, and a rear setback of 30 feet. Parking requirement would drop down to 1.2 stalls per unit, rather than the approximately 1.8 being proposed. Open space, the maximum or the minimum open space required is 15%. The maximum lot coverage is 50%, so the building coverage could potentially increase and the open space could decrease. And under the RM zoning ordinance, and at this point it would be an administrative item, it would be approved and finalized by the Planning Commission. There's no set requirement for a landscape buffer. There's no requirement for tree preservation. No architectural standard requirement, no affordable housing requirement, no sustainable design requirement. And conditions could be imposed, but only to mitigate any impacts, any perceived impacts generated directly by the proposed development. So the review criteria is much different under conventional zoning.
The current proposed lot coverage was 35%?
28.
28%, and the open space was 43?
Correct. Yeah. And that's not to say that every development would maximize what is allowed in the RM zone, but it's what's possible with a little bit less discretion by the Planning Commission. So again, this site plan is a reflection of that development plan as a plan drawing. Access by 6720 south to the north. A bridge would be built and creek improvements would be made to the banks of Little Cottonwood Creek there, and access over to Building C with a turnaround. So there would be one singular access. This has been reviewed by Unified Fire. The singular access for this many units required a code exception, and that was granted by Unified Fire, just conceptually.
Does our code require on the creek bed review or building to flood control standards?
Salt Lake County Flood Control will need to issue a permit for that. Yes. The building elevations proposed and this architectural design would again become part of the approved zone. And you can see there's some tower elements and some triangular rooftop elements, and those are the portions that exceed 50 feet in height that the Architecture Review Commission looked at and approved at their last meeting. Everything else is under the 50-foot height maximum. And again, the landscape plan. 20-foot buffer adjacent to single-family residential is proposed. That's along to the south of buildings A and B. And in this area, this is where we did a lot of work with the applicant to ensure that trees, as many of the existing mature trees are preserved there, because there are some very mature, tall trees there that act very well as screening and buffering, but are also a great amenity to have. New trees, deciduous trees would need to be planted to a minimum 2-inch caliper, evergreen planted at a minimum height of 5 feet, and obviously they would grow and mature from there. And again, the fencing requirement and the tree protection plan by an arborist. Okay, there were many concerns heard, many of which you'll probably hear again tonight, but 3 of the general concerns we heard from commissioners, from those involved, were the additional building height, the justification for the increase in height, the below market rate housing, and the traffic impact to not only 6720 but also to 1300 East. So I'm going to address those quickly. So I think it's important to understand what is in the PDD ordinance in terms of goals and objectives, and what requirements are required, or what is required to justify the added building height. In its goals and objectives, these are only 3 out of a list of many goals, but 3 applicable ones. One of the goals of the PDD ordinance, the developments in that area, are to provide for a range of employment uses at appropriate intensities and locations, support the integration of living and working uses, and support public transit services. Another one is to encourage creative approaches to the use of land through variation in the siting of buildings and the appropriate mixture of several land uses, activities and dwelling types, including a variety of housing types. And third, rezoning of a specific site to a PD zone should more appropriately address the unique physical and locational attributes. Elsewhere in the ordinance, there is a requirement for the applicant to submit a market study to justify that the proposal is feasible based on a competent market study, based on economic conditions. And that leads us to the development requirements. So the maximum building height in any Tier 2 PD zone is 50 feet if the first 2 stories, beginning at the street level, are commercial and or office uses. The maximum height is reduced to 35 feet for any building that either does not have commercial/office uses on the first 2 stories or is located within 50 feet of a single-family residential zoning district. We've heard comments, and there's been some questions of whether the 2-story live-work mixed-use units satisfy this requirement and justify the additional height. And I'll back up for a second and show you where those units are. I think it's easiest on this. There are 5 total. There are 2 each in buildings A and B. They're on the northeast and northwest corners of each of those buildings, and then on the very southwest corner of building C. And those are 2-story units accessed from ground level, from outside and from inside the parking structure, with an upper story that is accessed from stairs inside that ground level, that ground floor, or from a door on the second floor of the building. Reading and analyzing this provision, I think, requires taking in additional context of the ordinance and analyzing this property being located in a Tier 2 qualified or eligible area. Much of the goal, the benefit of the PD zone is that developments can be tailored to fit the context of the property where they're located. It's not a standard, X percentage of retail square or X square footage of retail in every PD zone. It's 2 levels. Staff has interpreted that and feels comfortable, given the analysis of the goals and objectives, that it does not need to be the entire first 2 levels of those buildings to be retail and commercial. And given the context of this site and analyzing this in a site-specific manner, 2 complete levels of retail and commercial use does not economically make sense on this property that has challenges with visibility and access. It wouldn't be economically feasible, and businesses would not succeed if placed in that situation, given the context. Therefore, the 2-story live-work units allow the flexibility, and they entitle those units for 2 full stories of retail or commercial uses, or a mix of residential and retail use throughout that 2-story unit. So the potential is there and is entitled for the entirety of those 2-story units to be used for retail or commercial use. Given the context of the site and the challenges associated with it, staff feels that meets the requirement to justify the additional height. That being said, this is a legislative proposal, and any decision reached just needs to be found to not be arbitrary or capricious, and determining that is an analysis of, is the decision that it's arbitrary or capricious or not arbitrary or capricious are reasonably debatable. So the standard here is the decision you've made reasonably debatable. So staff's interpretation is that it's reasonable that the proposed live-work units justify the additional height. Second provision is below market rate housing, and this is the provision language right out of the PDD ordinance. All PDD zone ordinances shall require the development to include below market rate or senior/disabled housing units, collectively BMR units, equal to at least 10% of the total number of units contained within the zone. Required BMR units shall be affordable to households earning not more than 50% of the city's median income, and shall be provided in accordance with standards, definitions, procedures contained in this code and the PDZ ordinance. The staff has felt this way since early in the process, but feels that the proposal does not meet this standard. The senior housing is okay, but the 10% discount does not meet the requirement to be 50% of the area median income. And that's why staff's recommendation for this provision is to strike their proposal altogether and replace it with substantial language to ensure that 10% of the units in these buildings meet the requirement of being affordable to 50% of the city's median income. And the language proposed provides regulatory ability to ensure that that happens and is followed in compliance in perpetuity. So part of our recommendation...
This is taken directly from our PDD ordinance.
This language here. This is not what's in the proposed ordinance, but this is the standard that it's set off of.
Zone,
correct.
Or our ordinance.
Yeah. And then traffic impact. A pretty thorough traffic study has been conducted, and staff recommends that once the traffic study is finalized and approved by the city engineer, and I think there's a meeting scheduled tomorrow to continue discussing this issue, that the city follow whatever recommendations are made in that approved traffic study. Again, we're close, but not quite there yet. As of now, the current recommended mitigations are to extend the left turn lane from 6720 onto 1300 East and to restrict on-street parking to only one side of 6720 South. We've looked at the area, and sometimes there are cars scattered intermittently throughout both sides. We feel that restricting parking on one side of the street will still provide the ability to park on street and will provide a wider drive aisle for emergency vehicles.
That would affect the existing developments along there as well. Anybody was parking outside of there.
It would, yes. So the Planning Commission, again, debated and discussed this throughout the course of 7 meetings. Their final recommendation was denial. It was actually a motion of approval with various conditions, and that approval did not pass. It failed by a vote of 3 to 4. Therefore, the recommendation to the City Council from the Commission is denial. The findings for denial, not every commissioner shared the rationale for their vote, but those that did, it seemed to be a little bit split. A few found that the proposal was not in compliance with the goals and objectives of the Planned Development District Ordinance. We've provided rationale in the staff report where how staff feels a little differently about that. And another finding was that building heights in general should not exceed 35 feet. And this was not due to the 2-story live-work residential commercial requirement, but more to the proximity to the existing development in the adjacent area. Again, those may not be the only findings for denial, but that's what we discerned from what was shared by the Commission.
Are the other developments in that area exceed 35 feet?
Stonehaven does. Stonehaven is about the same size, and in some places perhaps a little higher than this proposal. Pinnacle at Highland is 3 stories, so probably higher than 35, but not quite as tall as this proposed. And then the orchards at Countrywoods are probably about 35 feet.
So we have one that's close, one that's probably higher, and another that's also probably higher. And the 35 feet.
Correct. Okay. Other Commission recommendations that were part of the motion for approval were to lower the height of buildings A and B just on the protruding wings, so the portions of the building that protrude to the south. A recommendation was made to lower those by 1 story, and then the bulk of the building could still have that increased height. And another, again, recommendation was to limit the building height throughout the project to 35 feet. These were conditions that were included in the motion for approval, and because that motion failed, these conditions have not been incorporated into staff's recommendation, but we feel it important to show you kind of the commissioner's thought process on that. Staff's recommendation.
Sorry, just share with me again the building height of the development to the north and the southwest. What are the heights of those two again?
The southwest is the orchards at Countrywoods. I don't know the exact height, but those are 2 stories with tuck under parking. Those are probably pretty close to 35 feet tall. Pinnacle at Highland to the north is 3 stories with a pitched roof. So again, I don't have an exact height, but probably over 35 and under 50, in the ballpark of 40, 42 feet.
And you talked about the parking underneath. Was that discussed at all during the planning commission? Because I noticed with this particular property, there's a lot of street parking, right?
Yeah. So the first level of each building is structured parking. Because of floodplain and groundwater issues, they cannot go subgrade. They run into FEMA issues and other floodplain issues that probably didn't exist or weren't as strictly enforced at the time Stonehaven and the Orchards was developed. But because they hit a level of groundwater pretty shallow in this development, they can't go subgrade with parking, which is why the first level, a majority of the first level of each building is structured parking.
And there's 2 levels of residence above that.
3.
Are we moving right along? I know we got public here
Yes.
ready to make comments, so let's
Last slide.
Let's wrap it up.
Staff's recommendation here is to approve, subject to conditions. The most substantial condition is to replace the senior housing provision with true below market rate housing requirement, subject to the language in the ordinance. Again, a tree preservation plan, 8-foot solid fencing adjacent to that single family residential, and implementation of all mitigation measures recommended in a final traffic study approved by the city engineer. And there are other minor modifications made. The applicant's original proposal was 3 pages. Ours is about 10 or 11 pages. So we've added some more language in there to clarify processes and things like that. Sorry that took so long. I'm happy to answer any questions.
No, thank you very much, Mike. That's very thorough, and I'm sure we'll have some more questions. You hold on, but
and gone through lots of, as he mentioned, we've been to the city council and we've been to the planning commission, and we started that process with those preliminary plans. And through the process, there was a incorporation into the PDD, and then a change from 25 units to the acre to 35 units to the acre in that tier 2. And then obviously we started the planning commission process. And before that, we had submittals, and we had lots of public meetings and meetings with individual neighbors and property owners and condo associations, and held well over 50 different meetings as we went through this, trying to incorporate concerns and public comment. And obviously, it's impossible to incorporate everybody's changes to address everybody's concerns, but we've made a great effort, and we'll address some of the major changes that we've made as a result of hearing some of that feedback from the community and from the planning commission. As was pointed out, this is in your master plan and your long-term plan zoned as high-density residential. The PDD, which it's approved for, and the 35 units to the acre support this as well, and are recent approvals by the city council. And in almost all examples in requirements in the PDD, as were pointed out, we either meet or exceed those substantially, especially when it comes to like setbacks, where the wings of the buildings are still over 70 feet setback and the buildings are over 130 feet setback from the single family residence. And then we also on building C exceed the requirements of setback up against Countrywoods, and we've worked extensively with them and reached an agreement with with the board for the orchards for the changes we've made, and moved that building back further and not had the fire access go through their property, and putting the turnaround and water connections and preservations of trees. And I noticed in the staff they were recommending along the single family residence that the fence be of 8 feet of height, and we've agreed with the orchards that we would do that. That's what we would do there, and so that would be something that we've agreed to with them. If we can skip through the landscape plan. He's pointed that out, the elevations. Just pointing out that again, that we meet all of the requirements of the PDD has been outlined. We do have a discrepancy we'll talk about on the senior and our interpretation of that language in a minute. If we continue on to the development within the context of the general plan, just pointing out, it's situated, it's surrounded, it's got the freeway on one side, and it's surrounded by multifamily except for the small single-family neighborhood, and it's designated to be that way on the plan. And there was a question on, you know, what were the heights of the other buildings, and just to point out that Stonehaven, with its pitched roofs, its architectural appurtenances, is up to 65 feet high. So we'll actually be substantially lower than the development to the east, and similar to those that are on the north and to the south, other than the single-family neighborhood. We won't go into the comparisons. We can skip that next slide. You've got that in your information. But just to point out a few of the changes that we've made to our plan as we started going through this process. Originally, the wings on A and B were closer to the single-family neighbors, and we've pushed those back to move the height further away from the single-family neighborhood. And we said they're over 70 feet back with the wings, with 130 feet to the main portions of the building. We've worked substantially to increase the landscaping buffer. We've got that 20-foot landscaping buffer there. We have worked with an arborist to identify the preservation of the existing mature trees, and where that's not possible, to not only put new deciduous trees in with the calipers, but to put mature evergreen trees in and spruces that provide a greater buffer all year round versus just during the summer months. As we pointed out, residential building C has substantially been redesigned to move it further from the property line, and the configuration and interaction with the fire access and the turnaround, and again the preservation of the older trees in that area as well as along the entire property. But you've got that package, and you can see all the other changes that we've made. We're going to just turn a few minutes over to Wade Budge just to address the senior housing component, why we propose that based on the existing language.
Honorable Mayor, council members, staff, thank you for giving us time today. My name is Wade Budge. I'm familiar with the community. I'm a graduate of Canyon View, Butler, and Brighton. But more importantly, I'm familiar with this property because I've been going to it since the 70s. My grandparents owned what's now the Pinnacle property, so we were neighbors with the Walsh when I was growing up. And so I'm familiar with that area, the creek, and that surrounding what's now what remains a very beautiful area. Let me talk briefly about the senior units. This is important not only for this application, but also as this council prepares to hear other PDDs, because as written in this code, you are presented with two options. You're presented with the options of either proposing a senior housing component in a PDD situation, or alternatively pursuing an affordable housing. Now, we're happy to see that the city is now signing up for a more robust affordable housing program. We commend that. That's an important thing that cities like Cottonwood Heights pursue. But when we commenced this application process, we were presented with 2 points, 2 options, and that's because that's the way the code is written today. And the reason that we were presented with those, we consulted with our business team and our architects and went ahead and pursued the option of senior units. Let me just tell you the 2 main reasons why that's important for this council to consider. The number 1 reason is that when you're talking in terms of land use, there are 2 guiding principles. Number 1 is making sure that the reliance of an applicant on instructions it receives early is respected, that reliance. But more importantly, that when you're applying the code, you're applying it in a way that is consistent with what both the courts and what the statutes say about how you interpret codes. And what they say in that last regard is this, that if there's a question as to how you should interpret the codes, you give deference to the least restrictive interpretation, the one proposed by the land use applicant. And in this case, the confusion that has arisen as of late, and which was highlighted very well by Mr. Johnson, is the confusion about whether there is a requirement in the code that every unit in a PDD that is going for this 10% standard has to be a below market rate unit. And the reason is the word collectively is used in the definition. What we've suggested to both the staff and to the Planning Commission is that the word collectively was inadvisedly used, because if you use that word, the rest of this ordinance does not make sense. There are 3 other places in the ordinance where it talks about the option of either there being a senior housing project or a below market rate project. The other thing is it would lead to I don't want to use the word absurd, I think that's too harsh of a word, but a not rational result where the only option for a PDD in Cottonwood Heights would be both senior and affordable. And I know that that's not anyone's desire, that you limit your affordable product in this city to just simply seniors. And so the interpretation that we relied on, and was reflected, in fact, in the staff report that was presented on June 20th of 2018, is the one where you're presented with 2 options, and we chose the senior housing option. Now, I wanted to just provide that background because if the council's thinking, no, we want more of a suggestion or a recommendation or even a requirement that these PDDs incorporate affordable, the right way to do that is to do a pending ordinance and modify and clarify the ordinance. It wouldn't take but a few word changes to clarify that intent. Mr. Topham's very capable and can make those changes, and those could be reflected in the code for future PDD applications. But I thought that that would be important. I'm gonna spend 60 seconds on the, unless there's a question on that, I'll spend 60 seconds on the live-work units. Okay, here we go. On the live-work units, we submitted to the Planning Commission and the staff a lot of information about how these are emerging units that you see in a lot of cities. In my own experience, I've typically seen them in cities like Park City, Salt Lake, South Salt Lake, where you're going into a professional's office, where maybe on the first level you'll have a reception area, but you'll go upstairs for a work area. And these types of units are very, very sought after by a number of people who want to avoid a commute, people who want to see clients in their particular home, and they can go downstairs. Sometimes they just say, I don't want to live here. But in other instances, they have the option of living upstairs and incorporating that professional space at both levels. The other thing is it's helpful as we try to look at options to reduce traffic counts, to preserve our air quality. And finally, I just want to say that these units are built to commercial standards. They have storefronts, they have dedicated parking, they will have very much that commercial feel to them. So this is an absolute emerging use, and that we're happy to see that Cottonwood Heights codes allow for this. So happy to answer any questions, but just wanted to leave you with those comments. Thank you.
Does that mean there's going to be elevators with the senior? This says you have to have access. So I'm guessing there's an elevator in these.
Yes, there are 5 elevators in
Typically,
the
you
development.
may not put an elevator in a 3-story building. Is that
Correct,
correct?
yeah. For example, our other product, one building that I used to live in Lehigh, was a 3-story walk-up. The larger 2 buildings each have 2 elevators, and the smaller building C has 1 elevator.
If we can skip through the traffic, Mike addressed the traffic comments pretty well. We've talked about the tree preservation, so we'll skip through that in essence of time. The creek improvement should be pointed out. We took a tour out there with the Planning Commission and went, walked the site, and the plans that we're proposing for enhancing the environment around the creek are substantial. And they agreed that, there's really nothing, there's a lot of cleanup that needs to be done to make it a nice area. And we're proposing substantial changes to that not only aesthetically make it a better situation, but also from a flood control perspective. And we've met with the county and flood control and so forth, and have showed them what we're planning to do, and we're meeting all their requirements in our plans. As far as sustainability, which obviously you've spent a lot of time on tonight, ICO and Ivory are very committed to this in how they build, and we will meet or exceed those standards that are part of the requirement of the PDD. Here are just a few of the things that you can review at another time, so we don't spend too much time on it, of the things that we do and enhanced upgrades to these units. One of the differences, with the sustainability things, and then if we look at our next slide, ICO is a long-term owner. They build these developments to own them as part of a family portfolio and to hold long term. A lot of for rent type products that are built by what we'd call merchant developers who build them to lease them up and then to flip them to institutions. And they build to a different level because they're not the long term owners. We are the long term owners and managers of these properties. We build to a higher quality. We've just completed a few years ago and have started on the next phase with the Aston down at University Place, that we'd invite you to go see that or any of our other products, where you can see the higher level that we build to and the higher amenities that we have in these products, and we're able to achieve a 20% higher rental rate than anywhere else in the market due to the quality and the amenities that are in those units. And we'd invite you to, if you want to see the type of quality and why we build the way we do for long-term ownership, we'd invite you to visit those properties. And we've just kind of put, we'll just click through these slides real quick. We've put examples of some of these products that we've built, so you can see the character, the amenities of these developments. And again, we're committed to long-term ownership of these, and we'll build them to that different standard that will make a difference in your community and provide a very high-end, nice product for the city of Cottonwood Heights to be proud of, and that fits within this multifamily high-density area and the adjacent development. And we're here for any other questions if you have any. Sorry to rush through that so fast.
No, I'm sure we have other questions that we'll have later, and appreciate your patience. But if there's no questions, we've had several residents have been patiently waiting to make comments. So I'd like to hear them, and then maybe if you're around for a minute, we may have a follow-up question.
Okay,
that's
you.
all right. All right,
Yep.
Thank you. So we are in our public comments regarding this PDD zone change for the Walsh property, and so we have a few people have asked to comment. So Teresa, you want to come up? Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, and thank you for your time tonight. My name is
pull
Teresa
that
Rich.
microphone down to you.
Sorry, I'm short. My name is Teresa Rich. I would like to talk about why I am against the rezoning of the property. I know this process has been long, and not just through the Planning Commission, but even originating through the high density changes that have happened for the citywide in order to get this through as well. But I wanted to focus on a few points in particular. Number one, I don't believe, as you've heard several people speak of already, that it meets the affordable or senior resident ratios that have been specified in ordinances, as well as I believe it's not effectively enforced. Being able to have some kind of a wait list for those, I don't remember the exact month, but it was not a quick turnaround for the people who do not meet those requirements. So I think that's also something else to look at, in addition to the monetary ratios that have been discussed tonight. Secondly, I do not believe that it meets the commercial requirement for the PDD to be able to actually reach that 50-foot height. I do not believe within those two very important roles that this should be even considered for the height aspect. The live-work units offer home businesses, but in the meetings that we have had with the neighborhoods, they have actually admitted that they're really not enforced. They end up being a living room. They have not had them succeed. And they're not being enforced. This is not what the PDD is for. It's not for unenforceable goals to have a higher density and a higher architectural quota. Thirdly, I believe that those two criteria could have been worked out during the Planning Commission, but they weren't. So I do not believe that ICO is willing to negotiate appropriately on those important items for a PDD. Thirdly, traffic, I don't believe can be fixed. I think that the reason that the staff is requiring that all of the suggestions be met is because on that first traffic report, the exit from 8720 out, so as you're facing east, if you take that left turn onto the 1300 Main Arterial Road, it's already getting an E rating. The only worse is F. And once all of the traffic ratios were added in for the new development, it was a high E, it was almost an F. The only thing on that first initial official report was to increase the striping. And the bottleneck at the end of the street is actually worse. It will be worse at snow times and and it is also a drop-off for children, so I believe it is a children risk as well as pedestrian. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Teresa. Okay, Larry Wick.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Larry Weir, and I live on Birchwood Circle, which is south of the Welsh property. I implore you to leave the Welsh property zoned single family. Please listen to what all the neighbors in the area want. If left single family, it would solve a number of problems. Number one, parking on the 6784 South Road. 2, traffic onto 1300 East. 3, loss of trees on the property. And lighting from the parking lot. Our bedroom is just 40 feet from the property line. And noise from the swimming pool, of course. Please listen and take the recommendations of your planning commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, jury.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you for this time. Regarding that affordable housing, this is Cottonwood Heights. How affordable is it going to be? I looked up the median income and I don't hit it by a long shot. The only reason I'm in my home is I purchased it 31 years ago. So that's how long I've been a citizen. I was on the inaugural planning commission. Many of you know my background. Please listen to the planning commission. That's made up of citizens of Cottonwood Heights. The staff, we appreciate, we pay them, but they don't live here necessarily. They don't have to live with the effects of the decision you'll make. I don't have a problem with Walsh selling the property. I don't have a problem with ICO building. They have to make a profit. Some have said it's the last farm. The citizens can pool their money and buy it if they want, leave it a farm, make it single family. They have that option. But I would deny it. No, they talked about 1.8 vehicles. At the time I first heard that, call us decadent, but my husband and I, as empty nesters, had 3 vehicles. We wouldn't fit there. Now we have 2, okay, but we wouldn't fit. How many stalls are taken by the businesses has been spoken to, county. I'd like to speak to the safety and welfare of the citizens, which you're charged with watching, and I'd like to know the plan from our chief of police, our assistant fire chief. Imagine this scenario, if there is a major hazmat spill on that Union Park Avenue or in that area, and the wind's blowing east, how will you get all of those citizens out and first responders in along 6720? You're already saying, well, let's just park on one side. I was on the planning commission when they built Stonehaven on a farm with horses. It was pretty. They didn't have enough parking. They said, we'll park on the street. We'll park in that LDS church parking lot. LDS church doesn't want people parking there, especially overnight. Liability risk. They still do. When the LDS church parking lot fills up, I've been there at different meetings, we've spilled over into the businesses, the police come, run us out, but no one runs the cars out of that LDS church parking lot. So how will you get all the citizens out of Stonehaven Pinnacle, ICO development, out of that LDS church on a Sunday when 2 wards are there, so hundreds of citizens and kids? Just let us know a plan. Those are basically, my other comment on the 8-foot fence. I've stood in the properties, in the backyards, in the properties just south. That 8-foot fence will do nothing. But thank you. Please listen to the planning commission that you appointed. Thank you.
Thanks, jury. David Walsh.
Mr. Mayor, fellow council members, staff members, and members of the community, thank you for allowing me to have a few minutes of your time this evening. I am David Walsh. I am a member of the family who owns and is proposing that this property be developed by ICO. I am one of 11 children and represent all of them here tonight. This property has been in our family for nearly 70 years, and we have all been very much enjoyed growing up on what was and what we call the homestead. The landscape of the surrounding area has changed drastically over the last 70 years of our ownership. What was once a rural area with a few homes has become an area developed according to the long-term vision of the Salt Lake County and Cottonwood Heights, consisting primarily of multi-family residential housing. We understand that the proposed development may not be popular with some of our neighbors, and that some may fear how this development would impact their lives. As the owners of the property in the center of what is now a 3 multi-family development, we have been through this cycle more than anyone in the neighborhood, and we can empathize with their concerns. Over the past 50 years, we have watched as first the Anderson property to the southwest was sold and developed, and then the Brady property directly to the south of us was sold and developed. And then the Budges and the DeVinny's property to the north of us was sold and developed. And finally, the Smith property to the east was sold and developed. And not one time did anybody from our family object to any of the development and the marketing that went on there and the residential properties that were developed in those areas. However, we also understand that along with ownership, there are incumbent rights that are in place. We do not oppose our neighbors as their properties were developed in a housing type that is different from what it was before, and we have accommodated the growth of our area. We request that you give our property rights the same consideration. Do I get? I'm representing a group.
Go ahead, finish.
Thank you. The same consideration on any other property owner similarly situated. Their plan, that is ICO's plan, is similar in scale and intensity to the surrounding developments. It meets all code requirements, and it accomplishes Cottonwood Heights' long-term use plan for our property, which is residential high density. The process we have been through to get to this point has been lengthy. More than 16 months have passed since we began the process to sell the family property. We have been under agreement with ICO for over a year and are ready to move on to the next phase of our lives. This development plan meets our family goals, and we would note that we have selected ICO from a group of buyers, and that while price was a consideration, we chose ICO because of their strong ties and commitment to the area and for their reputation of quality. As part of our own due diligence, a number of us family members have visited ICO's properties in other areas in the state. We felt more than justified in recommending ICO to the other members of our family who were not able to attend as we visited those properties. We believe the plan that ICO has developed and the quality of their product are in harmony with the character of this area of Cottonwood Heights. We have met with ICO on a number of occasions to ascertain what progress has been made with respect to the development of the property. On each occasion, we have been shown a list of, and I believe we all saw that earlier tonight, of about 15 items in which IACO has modified its plans for the property at the expense north. It's cost them in excess of more than $100,000, and I don't know the exact figure. But nonetheless, they have gone well out of their way to try to accommodate all the requests of the neighbors who are surrounding. And the question that I've asked more than once is, what more could they do? And the answer is not much more than they reasonably do to accommodate the neighbors' concerns. On behalf of the 11 members of our family, we urge you to consider this proposal fairly and with our property rights in mind, all in the context of the council's actions this year on this property and Cottonwood Heights long-term plan. We ask you to do so in a timely manner so that our family can move on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh.
Thank you.
Jared Crocker.
Before I start my comments, on behalf of other citizens, I'd like to request that the public comment period, if at all possible, be extended at least another month, since this is the busiest time of year, and to have only one public comment period for the council for this item seems tough. So with that, my name is Jared Crocker, and I appreciate the opportunity to comment. We love the owners of the current property, we love the Walshes, and we also love the developers' representatives. Nonetheless, PDD 18001 is not a good proposal for Cottonwood Heights and its citizens. It should be rejected by the City Council. If we respect property rights, and I believe and hope we all do, then we must ask, how is the scope of property use determined? Therein lies the crux of the Council's task. Blanket approaches are ill-advised. Thus, historical land use designation is one factor for making the decision, and it should not here be mistaken for the sole factor or the predominant factor. That would be to over-apply a blunt instrument. To be clear then, the land use designation does not guarantee a given landowner approval of a zoning change application, nor does it imply an ethical obligation of city officials or citizens to approve such an application. It simply gives the property owner reasonable assurance that the application will be given due consideration in the context of its specifics. Now, that brings us to this situation's specifics, an examination of which reveals that this proposal would significantly negatively affect Cottonwood Heights and its citizens. Now, the applicant has pointed to multiple adjustments it has made in the response to interactions with the public. Those adjustments are real and fine and good, and they are a tree in the midst of a forest of concerns. The problem is not the details of the proposal. The problem is the proposal in this location. The area of the city in question is already densely used and populated. How ironic that some have cited existing crowdedness as justification to add a high-density apartment complex. Exactly the opposite conclusion should be drawn. The proposal would substantially increase light pollution, electromagnetic field pollution. It would choke traffic on the already out-of-hand 6720 South, as well as dump hundreds of additional vehicles onto the already dangerous intersection of Union Park Avenue and Fort Union Boulevard. The proposal would eliminate some of the most outstanding greenery, not only in the city, but in the entire valley. All of this in an area which needs its remaining openness and natural cleanliness more than any other location in the city. A heat map will show that. We can provide that. In fact, the sum of the analysis is that the rezoning would disproportionately favor very few citizens, the Walsh siblings, at the expense of citizens, hundreds, actually thousands of the surrounding citizens, because packing people in one part of the city is short-sighted. It sets in motion the dynamics of urban decay which affect the entire city. Everyone wants the Walshes to be able to sell their land. Certainly the few should not be penalized for the sake of the many, but neither should the many be penalized for the sake of the few. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jared. We just have a couple more. Krista Perkins. Krista, come on up.
Hi, I just want to say that you should follow the recommendation of the Planning Commission against the rezoning as it affects the safety, it affects the pollution, it affects the traffic, and all those that are living around it. Please take into consideration the citizens of Cottonwood Heights. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. Okay, I have one more unless somebody fills out a card quickly. Eric Cran.
Hello, I have spoken a number of times about this issue. September 2017, the PDD tier map was talked about at the City Council meeting. By November 2017, the PDD tier map has already been amended, record time. At that moment, I had already asked, as a strategy for the city, what's the purpose and how is it beneficial for the city's goal of redevelopment through the PDD process of Fort Union Boulevard. We need to remember that the PDD is just a tool to accomplish a master plan that the city has enacted. I contend that this project fails to meet the goals of the PDD and the master plan because of the geographic location of the property. Tier 2 originally included properties that face directly Fort Union or a major feeder roadway that connects them to Fort Union, for example, Park Center Drive. The Walsh property does not enjoy such connection to Fort Union. The project is essentially a gated community that will provide zero retail or services benefits, nor will it promote pedestrian, cycling, or mass transit benefits to the corridor. These, I understand, are essential objectives of the PDD and the master plan adopted by the city. While the goal seems to be the increased density, I will point out that cities like New York, San Francisco, blah, 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 have taken extreme measures to set aside parks for a reason. They complement that high density. The PDD and the master plan similarly sets out to achieve a careful redevelopment project of the area of the city with the highest concentration of residents already living there, as long with businesses. An important consideration to preserve real open spaces that do not have a fence that's close to the public. To the thousands of people that we plan to put in tall buildings along this area. Now that it's in the PDD tier map, the closest park open space for the people that live in this area is Mountain View Park, an open green space with little or no shade, for which the city, through the county, has actually purchased some shade structures. The Walsh property in contrast is full of trees, and yes, it has not been the best tended. They are talking about cleaning it up and making it prettier. But let's be real, that's what natural open space is all about. Getting the city involved to gather and organize businesses, residents, the very owners, Mr. Walsh, to create a valuable resource of open space to be used by everyone. For example, a small trail with community gardens, etc. It's an idea of how this tract of land could best serve the efforts to improve, rather than just aimlessly change the city. It cannot be minimized that the Planning Commission's strong language to not recommend this recent project was sent to you. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Eric, and appreciate everyone's comments. Anyone else who hasn't spoke that would so like to? I don't want anyone to feel left out. With that being said, any comments from the council at this point? Then Mike, where's Mike? I assume that we'll be able to agenda this for further discussion in a work session before we bring it back to vote. Is that right? Tim, is that understood? Yeah, okay, so that's what you desire to do. Yeah, I think that's my understanding, unless somebody feels differently, that I have several questions and a few clarification that we won't do tonight from the podium. All right, thank you. We'll close the public comment period and move forward with tonight's agenda. Thank you again for everyone's participation and attendance. We have a standing monthly report now from our Finance Director and our City Treasurer, Dave Muir, and Scott, who's doing it?
Somebody shake them away.
Yeah. Well, you can all stay and listen. It's really interesting. It's an auditor. Uh-oh.
Okay, so I'm Scott Jurgis. Is Russell Olson?
1 minute.
Okay.
Is this the latest you've ever had to stay? Oh, good. I don't want to be the outlier on that one.
All good. It's like the tidal wave of finance reports tonight.
All right, we're ready to proceed. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott.
So I'm Scott Jurgis, the finance director. This is Russell Olson from our auditor, Larson and Company. David Muir is not here tonight. It's actually his birthday, and they had a plan to do something and wasn't planning on this being this long. And so I'd like to thank him, though, because Dave put together the CAFR, and that's not a small task. It's a monumental task to do that. But I'm going to turn the time over right now to Russell, and he can read the report and give you his report.
My Christmas present to you is the abbreviated nutshell version. Is that okay?
As long as we're not stepping over anything critical that we need to know. And watch out, Dave Muir is coming.
Nope. We won't skip over anything that's critical. I'm assuming you have a copy of the CAFR. On page 9 of that booklet, and I'm not even going to open it, but that is our audit report. That's where we give our opinion on the financial statements. And that opinion is that in all material respects, the financial statements are correct. Now, there's a lot more information in that. Yeah.
That book's a picture of a park, so it's a different book.
So there's a lot of information in that booklet, and I'm sure you've all read it from beginning to end. And so I'm kidding, of course, but at the point in time that you do look through that and you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact our firm.
We've had one opportunity to review with
yeah, the audit committee has met and gone over it. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Our opinion is that they are materially correct. You should have another little packet that says independent auditors report in accordance with the government auditing standards. Independent auditors report on state compliance. Really, the first two reports there are a little bit cookie cutter, so I'm going to move past that to the management letter, and that's going to be on page 7. This letter is our opportunity to communicate to you as the governance of the city had we had any issues with performing the audit, and we did not, but this would be our opportunity to communicate that with you. There are a couple of findings that we discovered, and it looks like all 3 of them pertain to state compliance issues, and those are on page 9. There's a relatively new law requiring that cities put their meeting minutes on the public notice website, and we noted that it wasn't put on this specific website. You guys have published them on your own website for forever, but this relatively new law requires it to actually be posted on this kind of central website. So that's our finding. We recommend that you do that, and the city's response is that will now happen. The Utah Retirement Systems enrollment. Again, this is a relatively new law. It's not been around for for a lot of years, but you're required to enroll new hires really immediately when they're hired, and we noted that that hadn't been done, but and we recommend that you do, and that was just an oversight, and normally the staff or the employees are enrolled immediately like they need to be. And then the final one is the budget. The CRDA fund expenditures were in excess of final budget, and so obviously our recommendation is that doesn't happen, but in the transition of staff, I think that just kind of got overlooked. It is a concern when you go over budget, but it's not an earth-shattering thing that we,
Am I reading correctly that the overexpend was $30?
The overexpend was closer to $50,000. The difference between the revenues and the expenses was $30.
So I think we had budgeted 25 and we spent 15. It just didn't do the budget adjustment yet.
Yeah, we budgeted 25. We spent 75, so we were.
Oh, that's what it
over by
was.
50.
Yeah, and we just didn't do the budget adjustment.
So the revenue was there.
Yeah.
And that is the conclusion of our findings, and that is the end of my nutshell abbreviated version. Does anybody have any questions?
Stick with Scott here the full year. We won't have that problem next year.
No, we won't do that anymore. And again, I don't think that was anything that happened on purpose. It was just a lot of staff turnover at the time, a lot of things going on, and just got overlooked. And we won't do that. I do want to thank Larson and Company, specifically Russell, for his work on this. I already did thank Dave, but Dave's back now, and I want to thank Dave for his efforts in accumulating this information and compiling it. It is not a small task to do all that, and I do want to make sure that is noted and everything on that. Any other questions related specifically to the CAFR and the auditor report that goes with that?
We had that briefing, and I think it's pretty clean, actually. Yeah, with what we've been through this year is pretty minor.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And
To
then
your team.
The other two are mainly informational. There are two other items that you received. One is the budget book. That's the big spiral-bound book. And then the other one is the popular annual financial report that's folded in half like this and about 12 pages long. These two booklets, this reflects the budget that was adopted at the beginning of the year, back in August. Usually it would be adopted in June, but due to the tax increase, it was adopted in August. This is a booklet that reflects both the CAFR items and some budget items. It looks at both. And this is the booklet that's kind of intended for, if you will, the layperson to look at and trying to get information about Cottonwood Heights and the budget and the results of the city from the past year's results, the current year's budget. So these are all documents that have now been compiled. As a matter of fact, we just literally finished this one this afternoon after lunch. And all of these three documents will be posted to our website if they have not already been. And I don't know, Dave, do you know, has the CAFR already been put on the web? I don't know on that. After tonight. Okay. And then these other documents will as well, and I'll get them to Dan tomorrow so that they can be posted on the website so that they're all available to the public through the normal documents that are available there on finance. And then finally, there is the monthly financial report, and I am not going to take the time to go through that. There's nothing in there that is out of the ordinary from what we reviewed last month. If you do have any specific questions, my door is always open. You can route the questions through Tim or myself, and we're more than welcome to answer any questions that you may have, whether it's now or whether it's at a future period of time.
Scott, just one quick question.
Yes.
I know as we met previously, we talked about the projection of under expenditures. Are we still on a typical path of slightly under expended in most of our budgets? Anything surprising or out of the ordinary?
We're not seeing anything out of the ordinary in that. The only one is the one that I brought up last month, where Class C roads funds coming in seems to be tracking a little low, maybe about 100,000 low of what budget is at this point in time. So, but that's the only thing that we're really seeing that's...
Well, I haven't figured out exactly why yet.
We believe it has to do with high growth on the west side, especially the southwest side of the valley, and a lot of lane miles of traffic being added in that area of the valley as well, where we're not adding lane miles of traffic, you know, in that quantity. So we might add a little here and there, but it's not very much.
Any further questions from the council? Hearing none. Dave, thank you very much. Scott, thank you very much. Appreciate your efforts on this and excited for this year's budget process. We heard we had the meeting starting this week, so that's good news. Thank you. All right, we have a few action items. It's 9:30. Hopefully we'll be out here by midnight. All right.
Come back on Christmas?
Come back on Christmas? No. All right, the first action item is consideration for ordinance 311. This is kind of a continuation of our meeting earlier this evening with our CDRA, and that's approving the Second Amendment project area plan for the Canyon Center. I think we've been through that in our work session earlier and in our CDRA meeting, and we just need to follow through now on the final action.
Jason and Chris stuck around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been
Anticlimactic, maybe.
All right, I'd be entertain a motion for approval of ordinance 311.
I was going to suggest maybe we postpone it till the end of all of this. I'd move that we approve ordinance 311.
It's been moved by Councilmember Bracken. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Shelton. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Councilmember Bracken.
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton.
Yes.
Councilmember Bruce.
Yes.
Councilmember Michael.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Thank you. Following that same light, the next item, 4.2, is consideration of ordinance.
Oh, hold on. Hold on.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
We're not through with your stuff. You better be careful.
We are. I just wanted to say thanks for the vote of confidence. See you a little later. I got an early meeting in the morning. So.
Well, you've been here for 3 or 4 hours, so thank you. We have the documents. We'll get them to you right away. So
sounds great. I thought I'd meet you tomorrow at 2.
Okay.
I have
we'll
a
do
special.
that and for the closing. Yep.
Somebody gave me a pen about 2 years ago to sign these documents with. It's a little fly fishing pen. I think that'd be kind of fun to sign with that.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Good luck. All right. Item 4.2, consideration of ordinance 312, adopting our 2019 regular meeting schedule. Is that the first and
January? It's the second and fourth
And
Tuesday, and then after that, the rest of the year is the first and third Tuesday.
Okay. Is that it? Yep. So we've agreed to. All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, entertain a motion.
I move that we approve ordinance 312.
It's moved by Councilman Shelton and seconded by Councilmember Bruce. Any further discussion? You know, I'll call for the vote.
We could change it and go back to every week.
Oh, that's all right. I think we're on a roll.
Anybody armed?
All right, call for the vote. Councilmember Michael.
Yes.
Councilmember Bruce.
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton.
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken.
Yes. And
I will vote yes. The next item is Resolution 2018-73. Make sure I get the right one here. That's why I got the wrong stack. Okay, Resolution 2018-73, authorizing Salt Lake County Housing Authority to operate within our city limits. We had them at one of our previous meetings and bringing us up to date on that. Any further discussion on the interlocal with the Salt Lake County Housing Authority?
Can you just briefly, I apologize, describe what that means, what we're voting on?
What that means is, I understand it, and Tim, you can help me on this. We have two housing authorities. We have a couple housing authorities in the county. We have Salt Lake City Housing Authority, and we have the county. They have properties they administer within our city to meet low-income housing needs. And we've previously had an agreement that I guess expired.
Everyone thought we had, but they couldn't find anyone.
So it's just formalizing that working relationship for the properties that they will be managing our property, and obviously some further communication to help analyze needs. Pretty straightforward.
As a landlord, I've worked with the housing authority before, and they're fantastic. They come out and ensure that smoke alarms are intact and exits are as they should be, and then they send the rent check directly to the landlord. I move that we pass Resolution 2018-73.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Bruce. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Michael. Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote. Councilmember Shelton.
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken.
Yes.
Councilmember Bruce.
Yes.
Councilmember Michael.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Okay, the next item, which is Resolution 2018-74, we're going to table this and move this to a future meeting. Is that correct, on the Arts Council?
Continue it, yes.
Yeah, continue it. That's the right terminology, yeah. Also on item 4.5, consideration of resolution approving appointments to the Historic Committee. We'll also continue that one because of some last-minute adjustments. The next item is Resolution 2018-76. It's a Justice Assistance Grant for training for our officers, including de-escalation, body cameras, grandma requests, those types of things. Any further discussion on accepting this grant?
I think this is fantastic. $6,000 for training.
Yep.
Help us do some of the things that we actually formalized in our last meeting.
Yep. Part of those agreements, yeah. I applaud the effort. Any further discussion?
Making a motion.
Somebody make a motion?
I would move that we approve Resolution 2018-76.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Bracken, seconded by Councilmember Bruce. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Councilmember Bruce.
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken.
Yes.
Councilmember Michael.
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. The last item is one we had some comments on this evening. It's with ranked choice voting, or authorizing participation in municipal alternate voting methods pilot project, I guess is the official title. But anyway, we've had some discussion on that, and appreciate Shane's adjustment to allow us, as we move forward, if we need to modify this position, we can do that. So any further discussion on this resolution 2018-77?
I'm excited we're doing this. I heard nothing but praise for the program, so I'm excited to see it in action.
Yeah, I was really, I had seen it in April.
League meetings, yeah.
St. George didn't pay much attention, but when I revisited it again in September, I was like, I found some really good reasons behind it, and so I agree. I think it's we'll see if how it comes out.
We'll see how the county goes with it.
The voter registration education piece of it. There's a couple of other real benefits. So.
Well, I really appreciated it, the league meetings, when all of those in attendance took ballots and voted on pie, I guess what it was. It was interesting how they showed us how it worked, and it was actually quite impressive. So, Tim?
Just want to say appreciate Corey Holdaway for being here. He came and presented on this, and he stayed way late for this. So.
Well, if you could have come here a couple years ago, that would have been midnight, yeah.
Well,
Thank you for your attendance.
I was wondering who the last holdout was.
It took me a minute, then I recognized him. Oh, no, Cassie's the
Cassie's
last
here.
holdout.
Cassie.
Well, and Iko and Dave. Anyway, all right, so we're winding down.
Can I move that we approve Resolution 2018-77?
That's wonderful. We've got
Second.
Moved by Councilman Shelton and seconded by Councilmember Michael. Any further last comments on the subject? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Councilmember Michael.
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken.
Yes.
Councilmember Bruce.
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. All right. Next item on our agenda is our consent calendar, but let me make one correction for the record. The dates for the minutes are both November dates, not December, for the record. Okay. Could we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
It's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Bruce and seconded by Councilmember Shelton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion to adjourn by anyone who would like to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
It's been moved. We adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
We have no work session.
Hey, Dave, thank you.
Which is what I was. Oh, these are all 5,000 people, and they're probably the same batch as us, so we've got half there, and we're gonna